There's nothing between us up this road with 7 lanes. I know you're disappointed, so I try not to complain. Cause there's nothing between us up this road with 7 lanes, no.
What's up, everybody? This is Benta here in New York City in my studio, and I want to take you inside the newest single, the first single from my new EP, upcoming EP called Seeks. This one's called Road with 7 Lanes, and really stoked about the track. I want to take you inside a little bit about how I put the production together and how it came to me. So, first things first, just to give you an idea, obviously you see I produce in Logic. When I came up with the concept for the track, I was driving around in a U-Haul truck moving somebody's furniture, and as I'm driving, I get the idea for this, kind of drum beat, this loopy drum beat, and then this little melody that was kind of going on inside my head. And kind of it came to me very quickly, and that was the beginning of the idea for the track. So I quickly recorded the concept into my phone, and when I got back into the studio, I started to work on it. So this track definitely started with that drum beat. And what I tried to do with the drums, which is pretty typical to the way I like to produce and to the Benta sound, I tried to really combine sort of acoustic, real-sounding drums with more analogy, electronic, programmed sounding drums. And I think that's come to sort of define the Benta sound. So in this case, it was really the toms for me that were going to kind of drive this, and I wanted them to be dynamic and sort of swell in and swell out. And so toms are typically a great way to get a more acoustic-y driven sound. So here, as you can see, I stack 3 toms, so it's 3 lower toms that I put together, and I typically program my drums in Machine and then rewire them into Logic, and I probably did that in this case as well. But just to give you an idea kind of from the start of the track, I'll play each of them individually, and you could kind of see what they sound like put together. So here's the first one, and as you can see, they're all kind of panned to the left to give it the real space of what a real drum kit would kind of look and feel like. So here's the first one. You could see that, it definitely, I programmed them in a sense to make them sound like a loop. So they sound acoustic and sort of real, but at the same time, they're looped. So they have a sort of electronic edge. Here's a second. Deeper one. And then here's the final one. More like a mid-tom. Definitely kind of an acoustic feel, and then here's them all together as a stack. And as you can see, I sent them here to a bus, bus 3, which is actually all the drums are sent to a bus, and there's just a CLA3A compressor, which gives it a nice kind of raw, a more aggressive feel. A little bit of gain reduction there, and then one of my favorite plugins I put on everything is the decapitator, and it really gives it some edge. In this case, I got it fully wet with a little bit of drive, saturation, light distortion on it. So that's the tom loop, and then to start we have the snare, which has its own decapitator on it, giving it more edge, and this one's really hitting hard, so I have it to drive at 9, giving it a nice crunchy feel. Here's what the snare sounds like without it. It's a nice 9090 kind of electronic sounding snare, and then drive the hell out of it. And that's kind of the drum bed, and that was the idea for the beginning of the track. And then when you take it to the verse, which is, again, when I've put together the concept for the track, it was really kind of the drums with this vocal melody, which sounds like this together. And obviously the lyrics came later, but this was the idea in my head when I got started on the track.
There's nothing between us up this road with 7 lanes. And I know that you need to see me every 7 days. There's nothing between us up this road with 7 lanes, no.
So that was the idea. And then obviously from there I went on to arrange the rest of the track. And then let's just kind of take you through part by part. So we'll stick on the drums for a second. There's a kick in here that's kind of used a bit more sparsely in the intro and in verse 1, and then starts to kind of drive the track as we move forward into the second half of verse 1 and then the chorus. And then it kind of sticks and goes, cuts back out in the verse, and then, you know, comes kind of in and out to give it some drive. It's a pretty heavy sounding kick, and I initially I had it in all the way, but then I started playing with some accents, you know, that kind of picked up into different parts, and you could see that here as we go into the second half of the verse. And the kick, you know, has some EQ to give it a little bit more mid, a little punch. I took out a bunch of the lows. It was a pretty heavy kick to begin with, and I individually compressed this one almost with a 4-to-1 ratio. Pretty high level of compression too, to give it some extra punch. Here's how it kind of sounds in the lead-in into the second half of the verse.
No, there's nothing between us up this road with 7 lanes.
And then it's in. There's also a clap in the drums that is out of the intro, but comes in at the beginning of verse 1, and then stays kind of with the snare for the rest of the track. And here's how it sounds. Just kick and clap right there, and then clap with the snare, and with the toms. So that clap gives it some nice energy, nice added energy and boost. And pretty dry drum sound for this also. I wanted them to sound very upfront and kind of in your face. Then I have a little open hi-hat that I'll use throughout the track to accent certain parts. So for example, here it is. You'll hear it coming into the chorus. And then sometimes I'll double it up also. And then if we get into chorus 2, particularly the second half, it kind of leads in and then stays. And that's just a loop basically. It's very loop driven, as you can see from the audio file, very loop driven drums, which was deliberate on this track. And then I kind of chop the loops in certain places like this to give it a little flair. So you'll hear I get an accent out of chopping the loop here. You could probably hear it better over here. Right, so just playing with different chops on the loops. There's also a closed hi-hat that comes in, kind of drives the chorus forward. I love this one, that's in there. And both of these are very minimally processed. I probably did some things to them in Machine before I dragged them out. But they're just sent to the drum bus once I brought them into Logic. Here's how the close hi-hat sounds. Nice space, pan slightly right. Give it the spectrum of the drums again. Close hi-hats pan the opens pan slightly left. You'll hear it come in here. Okay, so we're building the drum bed. And all this is kind of coming with the arrangement. You know, as I arrange, I'm adding, subtracting, chopping. But the drums are super important for the Benta style and for what I do. Then I have this really sort of electronic, thrashy sounding crash that I bring in at the beginning of the second chorus, and then it kind of makes a couple of appearances throughout the track. It sounds like this. So it gives it a little bit of extra energy that kind of boosts the track along and builds. Then I love this thing. Initially I had this sort of offbeat 808 tom, well, well, it's panned pretty hard right, but I had it on the loop when I actually built the track, and then, you know, like I did with the kick, like I did with the open hi-hat, I kind of pulled it back, which is a lot of the ways in terms of how I produce. A lot of the times I'll have a loop of a bunch of different things all at once, and then I'll pull things back and add things in certain places to give accent. So I really like this sort of offbeat, syncopated, rhythmic tom. It sounds like this.
You told me that time was just the enemy now.
And that's again just a loop. Ba-dum, boom, ba-dum, boom. That's just, I love drums. I mean, it's something that really kind of drives me, particularly in the Benta project when I'm producing Benta stuff. I love drums, and I love interesting syncopated rhythmic patterns. So that's a cool example of something a bit spicy that's in the production. Then this is typically how I arrange. So drums at the top in green, and then I've got my bass instruments. So let's do the main bass, which hits in the first chorus. And this is actually still in MIDI, was not bounced down to audio. So what did I use here? I used Complete Control from Native Instruments, and a preset here that I probably mucked around with a little called Board Bump. And the bass, if we're going to listen to it in isolation, has a nice low end with a sidechain compressor against the kick. So it's bouncing in and out. And I took a little bit of the lows. I typically subtract around 30 hertz. I'll take out mostly anything having to do with bass, because it's a frequency you don't need. It's kind of messy and dirty. Here's the bass. Kind of has a nice lead-in sort of attack profile to it, so it swells really in and out. And that's with the side chain on the kick in there, so it gives it a nice drivey, cool feel. And this is a very drive-oriented track. And there you have it with the bass. And so that bass doesn't really do much automation-wise. It does nothing at all, actually, and just sits there throughout. And then in the bridge, there's another bass element that we introduce, but we'll capture that in a minute. Let's just go on the main kind of components of the track first. Then we have a synth pad, and what that is just a droney kind of cool atmospheric thing. And it starts in verse 1 when the verse comes in, and kind of just sits there. That's also, I use Complete Control for that, a massive patch. Pulled out a bunch of the lows. It's just really playing around the 350-ish frequency range and giving a nice little drone. So that's in the chorus. We're at kind of this point right here. It sounds like this all together. That's also side chain to the kick. So we get the ducking, get the movement. And I pitched it down 12. So here's how it sounds originally. Pitched it down an octave. Get it a little more dark sounding. Another cool thing that I did on this track is used a bunch of samples, and mostly samples that were taken rips from vinyl samples, and they really swell in and out and give the track kind of this swelly vibe that I was going for, and a dynamic vibe. So you'll hear them more so in the verse, but let's just play those, and they're panned in different places and side chained in certain ways, and some reverbs applied to them, and taken down, to get the pitch that I wanted. But here's how those sound in context. You'll hear one coming here. Has a nice final crackle on it, which I love. The dirtier the better, and here they are together. Sort of a stereo swell, different timing. And then they kind of swell in and hit out, really abruptly which gives room to the chorus. And so I love doing that. I do that on a lot of tracks, this one in particular, there. And then the vocal treatment, you know, for this track, let's just start there for a second. If we're looking at the verse. So I have sort of the lead vocal, and then I have a dub vocal, which basically is a mirror of the lead in terms of processing, just without some of the reverb and delay related effects. So on the lead, if you just listen to it in isolation, we sound like this. So it has a slight tape delay on it with a little bit of feedback. Pretty dry signal, but it's a quarter note delay. We have on the main track, we have a bunch of verb with no sort of pre-delay and 1 second decay time. So sometimes I'll do it on the main track. I'll put effects right on the main track. Sometimes it'll be only buses. This one is an example of both. And I'm also sending to a bus on this track. I'm sending a pitched octave down distortion, which I tend to do a lot, and it gives it a nice full sort of crunchy sound. You have the octave down with a drive, a distortion on it. So here's the without it. And then that's with it in. So it's really subtle, but it really gives it something. And you'll see, like on this chain here, I had a bunch of things that I ultimately take out. That's typically how I'll work vocally. So I'll try a bunch of things and kind of build the texture for the vocal. And then usually it's too much and the vocal sounds, you know, nice in a place earlier in the experimentation process. So I'll pull things back. And so typically I'll always start with an EQ, take out some of the lows, boost some of the mid highs, and then pop out some of the super high highs, keep it a little bit darker, vinyl sounding, analog sounding, kind of roll off on top. This one I have a light auto tune to give it a little bit of a glistening kind of effect. And then I have the CLA 2A, which I put on almost every vocal. It really kind of gives it a little bit of an analog-y shine and sheen to it. So that's on the chain, and then the delay and the reverb, and then sent out obviously to the pitch, as I said. In this particular track, after I had sort of the main comp take that I was happy with, it still felt a little too vocally uninteresting for me, and I wanted some texture to it, so I just did a dub, which again is processed. Actually, this is processed exactly the same, except it's not sent to that distorted bus. And here's how they sound together. It gives it a nice chorus, like flangey type of vibe, swirly.
No, there's nothing between us except this road with 7 lanes. I know that you need to see me every 7 days. 'Cause there's nothing between us except this road with 7 lanes, no.
So that's kind of the vocal treatment and the way I did that. And then if we go to the chorus, I really played with a combination of live vocals and my own sampled vocals to put the chorus together. And so you'll see here I have the sample in the ESX24, and these are chop samples of vocals that I initially recorded, but I wanted to do something specific with the cutoff and with the filter, and I wanted them to sound electronic and processed and sampley. So here is kind of the sample that I used for the vocal effect that kind of drives the melody of the chorus. It sounds like this. So it's really a combination of that sample doing the ooh, oh, 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 and then the ooh, ooh. The ooh-oohs here are panned hard left and hard right, and they make really kind of, you almost hear, you still hear the clicks and the clacks of the of the signal and whatnot, because I chopped them in kind of hard ways, and I like that because it gave a sort of percussive feel. So here's how the kind of samples sound together, the audio and then the sampled MIDI. So I like that. I felt it was kind of added to the percussive vibe of the track. And then obviously with the actual vocals, and you could see the spots in gray are the actual audio takes that I did that I then used to make up these sampled effects. So here's how it kind of sounds together.
Cut straight to my heart, it's just a matter of fact. You needed more from me, you needed more from me.
And then I had little effects that will come in and come out. You just heard it as this one stopped. So I had this sample that I found somewhere. I don't recall. And that's kind of in and out. It's pitched in a certain way, pitched down six notes, and then I've got a drive on it and some tremolo that's making it kind of jump back and forth stereo spectrum wise. So that's there. And then this other effect that I kind of used that I pitched down, I'm pretty sure this was myself that I took and sampled, but this basically runs throughout the track. It's this low kind of tone that goes nicely with the other pad, that droney pad. This is a lower drone, and it sounds like this. So that's me actually saying, come on, yeah. And then I pitched it down. And when you put that together with the pad and you put that together with the drums, you get a nice kind of weirdish sound that I am really fond of, actually. So it sounds like this. So it's subtle, but it definitely gives it a vibe and a flavor that's unique. And as I said, so I EQ'd it, sort of bring out those lows, took off a bunch of highs, and I shoved it down a bunch to give it the down-pitched sound that we're enjoying in the track. Let's take it to the bridge real quick. So those are kind of all the elements of the track. And that's how, you know, I put it together. Definitely minimal, definitely drum-driven type sound and drum-driven track. So we're light on melodic elements. We got a bunch of vocal stuff though. Some harmonies that go through, that come in the second chorus. Let's just play those harmonies real quick.
My heart is just a matter of fact. You needed more from me, you needed more from me.
Obviously high on the auto-tune there to give it that effect. So that's totally deliberate, to give it the kind of electronic, vibey, spacey effect. And then I got some reverb. And those channels are just dubs. Those harmonies are just dubs of the same take. Not the same take, but the same vocal line in that case. Taking it to the bridge, I introduce another bass element here, and this was an 808 that I just mucked with, an 808, a pitched 808 that kind of drove the bass line. And this has been bounced down and resampled a bunch of times, I remember, but here's how this one sounds. And then that goes along with the bridge vocal, which sounds like this. And this one's pushed pretty hard through the decapitator, giving her a nice drive. And then we have this harmonic bed that I made here on sort of the out of this bridge into the solo. And obviously there's a bunch of effects on this, so we're running it through EQs, through an auto-tune, through compressor, distortion, two separate reverbs. One is a mix of 20. It's the actual vocal reverb that we have on the lead vocal, and then I have it through a second verb that's doing a little bit something different here, which has a 2-second decay time at 15 on the mix, and I have the depth up pretty high, so it's a spacey kind of vibe. And these are all pitched differently in Sound Shifter, so it's one vocal idea pitched in 3 different ways and sounds like this. So that sounds kind of cool coming out of the bridge, which altogether kind of sounds like this. And then obviously we have that energy build into the B part of the bridge, which introduces, by way of this reverb here, this reverse delay reverb piece, this solo piece, which has been resampled a bunch of times. This is actually my vocal that I chopped from a part in the song, put into an EXS-24 sampler, played it on the keyboard to get the kind of notes that I wanted. And then the final outcome sounds like this, which is a totally unique sound and instrument, obviously, because it's my voice, but it sounds really cool. So this is what it sounds like solo, sort of solo of the bridge. The filter opening up slightly, and then panning to the left at the end. So here's how it kind of sounds in context. And then I took the first note of that and used that to comprise this sort of reverse reverb swell into the bridge. So let's just take it 8 bars in, and this is everything together. So that's kind of the bridge there. And then the last element that I introduce in this B part of the bridge with the solo are these ooh-oohs. And so they sound in solo like this. And so again, this is me saying ooh ooh once, and then I'm chopping it up to give it that. It also has that sort of clicky percussive sound that is, you know, by all standards of production, you should never have clicks in your music. But for this particular track, I liked it because all these clicks kind of gave it an additional, almost weird percussive vibe. And so those oohs kind of go throughout the track at that point. Once they're introduced over the solo, they carry out through the last chorus. And so just so you could hear them one more time real quick, on the bridge with the solo, you hear the oohs. And so that's what they sound like there. And then the only, you have a chorus, basically the out chorus, right? The only change here that's different from what we did before is the introduction of these 2 harmonies, which you could hear sound like this.
You needed more from me, you needed more from me. Ooh, oh, oh. You told me that time was just the enemy now. Ooh, oh, oh. Meet me in the middle.
And the swell in, and then the track drops out hard for this outro, and we have the 808 melody take over for the bass again. And what I really love is when the track kind of outs, you could listen to how dirty kind of the sampling engine was for this 808, and it kind of leaves you, the track leaves you with that. So it sounds like this. You hear that crunch and that sort of distortion on it. So I thought that was a cool way end the track. In terms of sort of the stereo master and how I treat my master bus, I for something like this where it's a part of an EP, I'm sending the track out for mastering to a mastering engineer, but I'll typically keep on my SSL compressor, multi bus master compressor, and I typically set it to peak at around 4 dB of compression. So if you kind of listen, you see it's hitting the 4. So I'll play with the threshold to get it to the point, and that kind of just glues everything together. So yeah, that's it. That is this sort of walk through a road with 7 lanes. I hope you guys like the track even more now if you check this out. And this is fun. It's the first time I've done a sort of walkthrough of something I produced in my studio. So more to come, and have a good one. Keep listening to Benta. Take care.